regardless of what they say is a good idea, and for whatever system or condition that they're talking about, was that even on your radar right out of the gate?
Right.
If they're saying, oh, you should take supplement X for condition Y, well, do you have that condition? Were you ever even concerned about it? Like by the end of the podcast, are you like, oh, geez, maybe I do have it? It's like, well, hang on a sec. If that was never a concern an hour ago, now all of a sudden you think you need to take this supplement and do this exercise because you think you might have, I don't know, insulin resistance.
I think I might be perimenopausal.
Bringing you a reasoned approach to health and fitness. This is the Phi Life Podcast.
Welcome to the Phi Life Podcast. I'm John Barber, and with me is Brad Pilon. And today I'm going to talk about the kind of the difficulty of following more than even just one person online that gives some advice on either diet or fitness or both, and maybe supplements to take. And I guess I'll start with my story. If people haven't heard before, I was following Peter Attia's podcast for a while, and he, does the concept of like monitoring things, testing things, getting ahead of any lifestyle disorder that could eventually be a problem later in life. And one of his things is to go get yourself tested, like find out, do you have any risks for cardiovascular disease that you can't feel them, you can't see them. If you don't go get tested, you don't know.
Right.
And same thing for cancer. You can go for some various pre-screens. You don't have to have symptoms to go, and you wouldn't know. Like both cardiovascular disease and cancer, you don't kind of find out till you don't feel it or see it till it's been going for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that made sense to me, and he had his he had his kind of rules on how to do it. And I was like,
were they like excessive, or like we're talking 3 or 4 rules, or like 20 rules type thing?
They're expensive. You have to go pay for this out of pocket.
Oh, okay.
That's all. I mean, the barrier is money. The barrier is not how hard they are. Like the time doesn't take long at all. The barrier is money. So if you normal North American medical systems, both the United States and Canada, don't really want to just spend money on pre-screening for you. Specific things, yes. For some reason, they're happy to pay for colorectal cancer screening and for breast cancer screening and for prostate cancer screening. But for what I ended up with, lung cancer, there's no standard.
Which is like the 5th most popular cancer
it's up there
in the world.
It's in the top 3.
Yeah, top 3. So you think you'd screen for it.
Anyways, the point is, I was following his podcast. I found it pretty informative. So I followed the advice. I went and signed up at a private clinic, and partly because I was on board with this idea, but I didn't follow through. And then one of my business coaches was like, "Oh, I actually do that. And there's a clinic like where you live." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So, and he referred me, and I got the referral rate. So I was like, "Okay, fine, I'll do this." And that's how I found I had both lung cancer and a genetic high risk for cardiovascular disease. So two of Attia's 4 horsemen I had. And so I was like, whoa, okay. So in my case, his concept of getting ahead of this, even though you have no symptoms, you can't feel it, worked for me, or worked really good for me. But then, so now do I just follow everything he suggests, or what else should I do? And so through his channel, you land on the usual suspects. You find Andrew Huberman and Dr. Rhonda Patrick and Andy Galpin and all of these different people who are experts in whatever their field is.
Right.
And at some point, if you've done any of this consumption the way I have, consumption of these different personalities online, you're going to realize you couldn't possibly follow all of their advice. It's
because they're all slightly different.
It's just too much.
Different prior, or just too much. Okay.
Well, there's kind of a meme, like people do a thing where I tried Huberman's morning routine, and after an hour I gave up. So now I don't know if he actually does everything he says he does, but he gives recommendations on what you could do. And it's like, wake up, go outside, get as much sunlight as you can, like go for a cold plunge, whatever it is. It's just so many different things, but that's just his morning routine. Then Attia has his, and Rhonda Patrick has hers, and then the next guy over has his
morning routine,
and
which is exhausting.
How could you do them all? It's impossible.
Yeah,
but are they all right, or is that just what works for their lifestyle? Like, who's to say you could even do what they do?
Right. And that's just
Maybe
their
your
mornings.
lifestyle that's just their morning.
Yeah.
Right. And then however they train, like, Attia's big on the zone 2 thing, but then he's big on, you got to push your VO2 max up. It's like, oh, okay, this is just getting out of hand. But then does everyone else do that? And what if your goal is like, well, I want to do some of that because it sounds like it's good for health, but I also want to change my body composition, but that's not really what that's for. So
you're just being like goal hijacked in 100 different directions all the time. Is that
so easy?
Yeah.
So
okay.
easy. Like, I don't get how people who don't have a degree in physiology can even follow any of this along and make a confident decision as to what advice to take and what advice to leave behind. Like, that's
right. How do you know which is
That's all you and I do. Like, we're just like, oh, that's a good idea. I mean, it just makes sense to me. But we have graduate level training in this, so we
do
can
it for a living. Then we have time,
and we do it for a living.
Yeah.
And even then, we run across people's ideas who are like, oh, yeah, I didn't even think of that one.
Right.
But so there's lots of, we're still learning. We're still always learning. But I would suggest we at least have enough education to put our own, like, I like that idea, and I'll leave that one behind. Right.
Yeah.
But for people who aren't trained in this field and don't do this for a living, I don't see how. I mean, all of it sounds convincing. Like, all of it's like,
it really does.
I gotta do that. And then, oh my God, I gotta do that. And like, we're talking about people who are PhDs in their field or physician or MDs, like Attia, Huberman, Patrick, all of these people, they have higher educations than you and I do. Like, there's no reason to say that they don't know what they're talking about. So how could you, who are you or who are we to say, well, that can't be right?
Yeah.
Because it's what they do.
I feel like it's not even seeing the forest from the trees. It's like the forest from the chlorophylls in the leaves, right? Like, they go so dug down, and then, but people are more like, yeah, but is there a forest there? And there's like, I don't know, but there's 3.2 trillion chlorophylls. You're like, is that a forest? Like, I don't feel like we're talking the same language. So I do feel like they dig down, and it's hard for the average person to figure out what is going to move the needle the most. And then if it's not like some sort of, I don't know, ratio of like, pain in the ass versus how much did the needle move, right? Like, I think I saw a tweet going around, and it's probably taken massively out of context, but I think it was the Dr. Rhonda you were talking about.
Rhonda Patrick.
Yes. Yeah. She was on with Huberman, who's the beard guy.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about like a 1 hour long cold plunge for dopamine. And I was just thinking, like, not happening. No, I'm not doing it 2 minutes. Screw you guys. It's gold, right? Like, it's so I think it's that whole pain in the ass versus doing something for show versus am I actually getting a benefit? Because I think a lot of this stuff outside of like you looking for the four horsemen is people doing stuff for something cool to tell their friends they did at bowling night, right? So I could see how that could be completely overwhelming.
Right. And it's, I mean, there's so many things you could do. Those things are extreme. Some of them are easy. You're like, I'm just not doing that for an hour. Like, no. You don't need to be educated in physiology to know, like, that's just absurd. I'm just not doing that. Whether or not it even has a benefit, it's just impractical for a lot of people. I'm not doing that. So some of these things, it's easy to just cross it off the list, or it's easy to say, oh, I could do that. Like, I could go for a walk every night. Like, I'll try that. Yeah. So, but then between the two extremes, the super easy ones and the ones that just seem ridiculous, there's so many choices in between, like entire supplement routines, like ways to break down how you eat, like just so many different ways to exercise. You couldn't follow all of them, even if all of them have a good reason why everything they're saying is worth following, at least for somebody.
And you're not even talking about like massive diet hacks, like vegan versus carnivore, or training hacks, like long distance running versus weights. You're talking about little buildup of 5-10 minute things you do throughout the day that add up to way more than 24 hours. Right. And then you have all the major changes on top of it. So yeah, I could just see how it's completely overwhelming for most people.
Right. So then what do you do with all of that? Like, how do you even decide? I mean, to me, I made some notes here. So to me, it's like, regardless of what they say is a good idea, and for whatever system or condition that they're talking about, was that even on your radar right out of the gate?
Right.
If they're saying, oh, you should take supplement X for condition Y, well, do you have that condition? Were you ever even concerned about it? Like, by the end of the podcast, are you like, oh, geez, maybe I do have it? It's like, well, hang on a sec. If that was never a concern an hour ago. Now all of a sudden you think you need to take this supplement and do this exercise because you think you might have, I don't know, insulin resistance.
Perimenopausal. I think I might be perimenopausal.
Right. Well, yeah, but they could they're not, nobody online is doing anything nefarious, but you could kind of start thinking you have all of these issues. Like, oh, I'm a poor methylator. Oh, I must have insulin resistance. Oh, gee, maybe my VO2 max sucks. Oh, like you could start thinking like, oh my God, I just have so many things I need to do. But hang on, have you measured any of these things? First of all, do you care?
Yeah.
Second, do you have any proof you actually need to improve any of these things? Like, do you even know?
And then my worry is that you're adding an undue amount of worry into your life. Then you're just giving yourself a compounding list of things to worry about in the back of your head. Kind of like if you're admitting that I should probably take a supplement for this thing, because then you're admitting that this thing might be a concern.
Right. And you know, they're all good at what they do, but boy, all of three of them seem totally obsessive compulsive. Like
I've never met any of these people, so I'd be curious, but I bet
if they do all of what they say they do,
yeah,
my goodness, they don't seem like fun people to have dinner with, because I don't know, I'm assuming Attia would be measuring his blood, and everything is like, there's just so many things that they're all doing. Maybe the scientist in them just can't stop being a scientist, which is great.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, is it science or is it fear? And that's my thing with these people is they all, and I'm lumping you all together, and I apologize, but seem like people who are just immensely afraid of dying or being sick. And I feel like it's not even a science inquisitive. I'm just a person who loves questions and answers. It's more I don't want to get sick and I don't want to die ever, and I just want to optimize for everything. I feel it's fear driven for a lot of them. At least that's admittedly I haven't actually sat through any of their podcasts, so it's not my style to listen to that stuff. But from the brief snippets I see, which are obviously taken massively out of context, I feel like that could be part of it. Is a sort of a weird OCD to your point, but also a fear-driven drive. If that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, you could see it that way. I mean, you'll never know.
Yeah.
We'll never know. I mean, obviously there's some curiosity. I guess if you just research your way down that rabbit hole and you're like, oh, I can work on reducing my risk of cardiovascular disease, then I can work on that. But then I think I could see how you start getting to this point where all you see are risks and then how to reduce risks.
Yeah.
And I could see how that just turns into a life of avoiding risk till the point where you just don't leave the house. Like, that's
one seatbelt is good, 2 seatbelts is better, which means 3 seatbelts, which means don't drive, which means don't leave your house, which means I could see it going that direction.
I mean, I sound like I'm ripping on Attia, but obviously following his podcast got me to the point where I got rid of lung cancer.
Which is, exactly.
So clearly there was benefit, but one of his things is he's like, he breaks it down to what's the more common direction to get T-boned in a car accident. And I guess it's slightly more common on the left in North America. So he just looks twice to the left.
Really? Okay.
So,
not knocking you. Like that's just, I do weird stuff too.
Yeah,
that's just,
I guess I'll say I'm forever indebted to Attia for following his advice, finding cancer, getting rid of cancer. But
otherwise you'd be dead.
But come on. Like, it's, I don't know. It's hard for me to say that because of the benefit of following his general concept.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see how you could become obsessive compulsive about it. And now you're increasing your stress, worrying about all this stuff, when stress itself is a major risk factor for all of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Or just the fact that we're all trying to stay alive so we can enjoy being alive. But if you're not enjoying being alive because you're too worried about not being alive, it's just this weird funnel of, I don't know.
Where's the balance between worrying too much about this to the point where to your point, you forsake your life just to have more life?
Yeah.
What's the point of that?
And I don't think I'm very ignorant to all that podcast stuff. So an ignorant is bliss approach is probably not the right approach either, but I don't know how you strike the healthy balance.
Yeah, I guess that's what we're getting at here. Where is that balance between consuming too much information, becoming too obsessive compulsive about trying to control all the things in your life that you can potentially control? But again, these are all risk factors that you can't prove 100% will change an outcome at some point in the future.
No, but the big ones, like your scan did. So I guess it's right. Does this actually show something, or am I guessing at there might be something there, so I'm guessing at what might get rid of it, right? So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So I guess what was the point? The point of this is, I mean, you can get caught in the cycle here and the churn of just consuming more and more information. And each one of these, if you even go down this road, like Brad, you said you did, it's probably better that you didn't, because you're going to get recommended the next person over and the next person over. And everyone here is well educated. They know what they're talking about. Their intentions aren't bad, but if you're not careful, you could get completely obsessive compulsive about it and not know what to do. Well, we got a friend who, Dave, looking at you right now, and he's intelligent. And I mean, he knows, he makes supplements. He knows the industry, and he still gets caught up trying to figure out what's best for him, what to do. So I try to talk him off the ledge.
Right.
And we recently bumped into each other at a DEXA scan. We happened to have our scans back to back.
Completely by coincidence? That's awesome.
Totally by coincidence. And he only went there because I was badgering him on like going. And I'm like, dude, why don't you just find out what your composition really is? And it turns out he has like the 99th percentile of lean muscle mass. Like it's through the roof. Like I was shocked. He's got more muscle mass on his body than I do a whole body. Like that's how much, but we're the same height. That's how
his muscle mass was above your body weight.
I was 187 pounds. His muscle mass was 190. At the same height. I mean, he's got pro football muscle mass. It's just, I mean, for anyone like me who's always trying to build muscle, it's like I'm jealous of someone like that who's just the muscles, just so much there. Of it, right?
Yeah.
And his bones are the highest I've ever seen bone mineral density. They're just through the roof. And I just couldn't believe it. And even the girl at the clinic, she's like, "Oh yeah, no, that's really high." Like she's like, maybe one other person has had bones that dense.
Wow.
And lastly, his skeleton weighs the most she's ever seen, which just is indicative of really dense, really solid bones, which is like, I don't know if people understand, like that's super rare. Like it's just, you know, most people's skeletons are like 6 pounds. His was 10. It was just so much. He's like Wolverine. It's like made out of
I was just going to make that reference. Damn it.
Yeah. That's what we were joking in the clinic. I'm like, I don't know if this is bone. There's got to be more going on here. This is so dense.
Yeah. Laced with adamantium. Yeah.
Anyway, so we were taught, and so he was struggling with trying to work out for gaining muscle size, like hypertrophy training. It was really breaking him down. Like his system just couldn't handle that type of training. It's just like, it was breaking him down. He was getting sick. He was making him feel lousy, but he's like, man, but I feel like I'm supposed to be doing hypertrophy training. And I'm sure some podcast somewhere said that's the right thing to do. Right.
Yeah.
Now, after the DEXA scan, it turns out he's got more muscle mass than everyone else. You couldn't have more muscle mass at his height if you tried. Like that's how much muscle mass he has. So we're like, look, now do you understand you don't need to train for hypertrophy? You can train for however you feel good.
Yeah.
And that doesn't break you down. And that's what you should do now. And I hope that this scan gets it out of your head that you don't listen to any more people about hypertrophy training. Don't listen to any more people about bone density, because both of yours are through the roof, and train the way that feels best for you. And you know what the crazy thing is? He used to do that and it felt great.
Yeah.
He used to train.
That's the issue, right? You get goal hijacked and talked out of what you do, what you know fits you, and then you start doing what fits other people. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And again, he's not, he's intelligent in this field. Like he knows this field. This is what he does. And he's still some expert convinced him out of what was already working for him into something he doesn't need to do at all. So this one little scan, 5 minutes.
Yep.
And I hope afterwards, I'm like, do you now understand? Don't ever do that again, because that training is just breaking you down.
Do you remember we had a guy way back with Adonis during the original contest, and he didn't quite have abs, flat stomach, but he scanned in at like 6% body fat. You're like, you don't need to lose, you need muscle. Like the scan tells you, don't listen to anyone, don't talk to anyone about fat loss. You don't have any to lose.
Right. Yep.
If you want it to change the way you look, you have to add muscle. So he's like the flip of Dave, right? Like it's like, dude, you're there, you're done. Let's build some muscle. And
that's
I think
Vivek. That's Vivek. I went and visited him in. What's up, Vivek? I went and visited him in Texas.
Nice.
But yeah, so, and he again, for you or I, we have enough muscle mass that 10-ish% you can see abs, but he was all the way down to 6. His issue was not, like, to your point, not fat mass at all. He just needed to build some more muscle, and then the abs would have shown through.
But if you don't know that, you're just following whatever guru online who happened to be a charismatic in the way that spoke to you, and you're like, I want to do what that guy does or that girl does.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the trick to the whole thing.
Yeah. And to our point with Dave, you could be convinced out of what was already working and feeling good into something that felt worse.
Yeah.
So anyways, I guess the point is, if you're going to, it's tough.
That's the
and
point.
Even for people who know what they're doing, they can still get convinced out of something or into something that's not good for them. So I guess the takeaway message here is, if you're going to consume any of this stuff, that's fine, but you really have to apply it to yourself. And it's like, does that make sense for me? Like, and if it doesn't, if you don't have an objective way to measure where you are now and what the purported benefit of whatever it is you think you're going to try. So in Dave's case, he was training for muscle hypertrophy, but he has more muscle than anyone else. So why would he? He's not doing that. If he'd have known that first, maybe he wouldn't have gone months of training himself into sickness.
Yeah. And you can do that. Like,
Yeah, totally. So no, any advice that you're going to follow, stop, write down, like, what is that supposed to do? Do I need to do that? Do I know how to measure the results? Do I even know where I'm starting? If you don't know any of those things, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't bother. And leave a comment or hit me up on Instagram or Brad up on Instagram. If there's something you're struggling with like that right now, let us know, and maybe we can sort through it and even do it on a show. Like, just talk through, like, give us an idea of something you might be struggling with right now. Something you want to try, but now you're like, well, I don't know if I should even do that. And how do I even measure if it's for me?
Yeah, like a health and fitness case study type stuff.
Sure, case studies.
Be fun.
All right, so that's a good place to leave it. So for Brad Pilon, I'm John Barber, and that's your Fi Life Podcast.